This video discusses printing step by step. We'll discuss the 3 main steps to making a great print, and the first step is density control. I like to select images to print from the contact sheet. It's easier than trying to select them from the negative. You can actually learn a lot about your negatives by looking at the contact sheet. The brighter images have more exposure, the darker images have less exposure. It's best to choose a normally exposed negative when you're learning to print. It's just a little bit easier to work with. A normally exposed negative will show up on the contact sheet as being pretty normal looking. It won't be overly dark or light, and the density will be pretty close to what you expect your final print to look like. However, there are ways of adjusting your print to make the picture look different than it does in the contact sheet. Once you've selected your negative, put it into the negative carrier. This would also be a good time to check for fingerprints and dust. Carefully slide the negative carrier into the negative carrier door. Check that the filters are on and set to a number 2 or 2.5. It's best to always begin with a number filter that is in between 2 and 2.5. Now place the printing easel on the baseboard. Move the enlarger head up and down to adjust the size of the projection. It should be small enough to fit the whole picture onto the easel, but large enough to slightly overlap the edges of the easel. This will ensure you can have clean white borders on all the edges. As you adjust the projection size, you'll also need to focus the projection. For greater accuracy, focus with the lens wide open. That means the f-stop is at its lowest number and the lens is at the brightest setting. Slowly turn the focusing knob back and forth until you see the image come into focus. Then use a grain scope to examine the grain. You can use the grain scope to see the actual grain of the image in the film and refine the focus. Always place the grain scope in the middle of the printing easel. You can also improve accuracy by using a focusing sheet, such as an extra sheet of paper, in the easel. After the image is focused, set the lens to the desired f-stop. I like to start with the lens wide open, then close it down 1 or 2 stops dimmer than the brightest setting. That action is also known as stopping down the lens. Every time you make a print, you will need to make a new test strip. Lay down a piece of paper on the printing easel with the emulsion side up. You don't need a whole sheet of paper. You can just cut a piece of paper into smaller strips, then use one of the smaller pieces. Cover most of the paper with cardboard and expose for 5 seconds. It's important not to allow the cardboard to touch the paper or the easel because it might accidentally move it. After you make the first exposure, move the cardboard about 3/4 of an inch and make another exposure. Move the cardboard again and make another exposure. Continue this way until the whole paper is revealed. Do you remember those processing steps? Slide the paper into the developer and agitate for 1 minute. About 5 seconds before the time is up, use the tongs to pick up the print. Drain the chemicals from the print for about 5 seconds, then drop the print into the next bath. Avoid touching the tongs to the next bath. We've got to keep the tongs separate. Agitate the paper in the stop bath for 30 seconds. Again, about 5 seconds before the time is up, pick up the paper by the corner using the tongs and let the chemicals drain away. Then drop the paper into the fixer. You will use the fixer for 2 minutes. After the 2 minutes are up, you can use the tongs again to drain away the chemicals and place the paper into the holding bath. Give the paper a quick rinse in the holding bath and then place it into a tray to look at it in the light. Remember to always use a tray when handling prints. Don't handle them with your bare hands. Now it's time to evaluate your test strip for density. Density is a word that's used to describe how light or dark a print is. It refers to the concentration or density of silver within the paper. Choose the exposure time that has the right tone in the highlights. The bright areas of the print should still be bright, but they should have tone and detail. So what if the exposure time is too short? Ideally, the time should be no less than 15 seconds. Try closing down the lens and testing again. And what if the test strip is too light? Try opening up the lens or adding more time. Now we're ready to make a print. Set the timer for the desired time and make sure the enlarger light is off before you proceed. Slide the photo paper carefully into the printing easel, being careful not to move it. Make sure the emulsion side of the paper is up and press the expose button. Process your print like you normally do, and always use a tray to bring the print into the light. Don't try to judge your prints in the dark. Now is a good time to check the density of the print. Again, make sure that the highlights are bright and have detail. Don't judge the density based on the shadow areas or the dark areas of the print. The second part of printing is contrast control. Whenever you print, always begin by choosing the right density first and then choose the contrast. To evaluate the contrast, look at the shadow areas of the print. That's the darker areas. You should see rich shadows with detail and some true black. Let's compare the contrast on two prints of the same negative. In the print on the left, the shadows are too light. The darkest areas are not rich and dark with detail. That means that the print is too low in contrast. The other print has shadows that are too dark. The detail in the shadows is lost, and this means the contrast is too high. Variable contrast paper allows you to change the contrast of your prints. Colored light changes print contrast. On some enlargers, plastic filters are placed into the enlarger to change the color of the light. On other enlargers, the filters are built in and they change the color of the light. The color of the contrast filters ranges from yellow to magenta, and they are also numbered from 0 to 5. Low number filters reduce contrast, while high number filters increase contrast. Filters from about 2 to 2.5 produce no change in contrast. It sometimes helps to try a few different filters on the same image. Then you can choose which filter looks right. You might need to use any number of filter to produce a normal looking image. A number 3 filter produced the right contrast with this particular negative. Printing Part 3. Burning and dodging. When making a print, you'll always start by choosing the right density. Then you'll evaluate the print contrast and choose the contrast filter to use. The third thing you need to do is evaluate for dodging. Look for any isolated dark spots that are still too dark despite being the right contrast. It helps to make some test strips to find the right dodging time. To dodge is to make a shadow while the print is exposing. Dodging reduces the amount of exposure in just a certain area of the print. Dodging must happen during the base exposure, not after. You should keep the shadow moving for a softer outline on the shadow. This will blend the dodging in and make the print look more natural. During the exposure, dodge for the amount of time indicated in your test. It's best not to guess about dodging time. If you don't move the dodging tool around, the shadows show up too much. A hard line indicates poor dodging technique. Dodging brought out the detail in the shadow area of this print. Dodging should always be subtle, and it will improve overall quality of your print. The last step in printing is to evaluate for burning. Any isolated bright spots can be resolved with the burning technique. When you burn a print, you're adding more exposure to a certain area of the print after the base exposure. It's a good idea to make some tests to determine how long you want to add exposure to that area of the print. If you guess, you're going to waste more time and materials in the long run. Burn in those areas of the print after the base exposure. Use a burning card to create a shadow over most of the print and allow a spot of light to come through. Keep the burning card moving to blend the adjustment into the rest of the print. Keep the card low for a smaller spot of light and move the card higher for a larger spot of light. When the card is higher, the shadow will also have a softer edge. Burning made the bright corner in this print less distracting. The effect should be subtle, but it will improve the overall appearance of your print. If you don't move the burning card around, the shadow shows up too much. A hard line indicates poor burning technique. So let's review the steps to making a great print. First, determine the right density. You should choose density based on the appearance of the highlight areas. Then adjust the contrast as needed. You'll evaluate the contrast based on the shadow areas of the print. Last, evaluate for burning and dodging. Only use these techniques as needed. Always follow this order for faster, better prints. If you go out of order, it usually takes more time and wastes more materials. So let's also talk about print evaluation. Do your prints show good technique or great technique? Let's compare two prints of the same negative. The print on the left does not have the right density. The contrast was not evaluated correctly and it does not have the right contrast. Burning and dodging were needed, but it was not done. The print on the right shows the correct density and the contrast has been resolved. Burning and dodging were needed and were done correctly. Project grades are determined by a number of factors and printing is part of it. A print like this will lower a project grade significantly. Let's talk about some of the reasons why. First, the print was not carefully positioned on the paper. The print was also not fixed properly, and this led to some purple stains. The burning was not done very well, and there's some white spots from dust that should have been touched up. Dodging was also not done very well, and you can see the outline of the dodging tool. The print has also been damaged, and there's some scratches on the print. The print was not agitated in the developer, and this caused part of the print to not develop fully. This print also has some mysterious yellow stains. The best advice I can give you if your print looks like this is to just not turn it in. It actually needs to be remade. Instead, turn in prints that look like this. Follow these steps. Position the print carefully. Make the size appropriate. Focus the enlarger. Choose the right density. Choose the right contrast. And do burning and dodging only as needed. Always use good processing techniques and protect your prints from damage. So that's the end of our video today. Now it's your turn to make some great prints in the darkroom.